So hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is the lecture 7 series of Kubernetes 0 to Hero. So today we will discuss about Ingress, a very important topic in the networking of Kubernetes, that is Ingress, right? So we will discuss everything about it, but I just want to recall that in previous video we have discussed about services, okay? That what are services in Kubernetes and what are the types of services, like types of services like cluster IP, load balancer and node port. Okay, so in today's video we will discuss about ingress. Okay, so what is the ingress? So basically ingress, like we previously discussed about service and node port, that they were used to expose the internal application of a cluster to the outside world, outside the cluster. Okay, so similarly ingress is also used to we can say it is also used to expose the applications running in cluster to outside or to external, like to expose it. Okay, so how does it do that? This is a diagram. So in diagram you can see, okay, this is the client means or any UI application or outside of the cluster. This is the cluster, right? So our applications are running here, these are pods, right? And these are the services. So our ingress comes here and some rules are defined routing table. Okay, we will discuss each of them, but on a high level it is ingress is coming between, ingress is a component in the cluster only. Okay, so the any traffic that comes to the cluster, it first comes to ingress, and then ingress depending on some routing rules, we will discuss each routing rules, but depending on some rules it will direct to each of the services inside the cluster. Okay, now we will discuss in detail about this ingress. Okay, so first of all, some important points about ingress are that, okay, first one is this: it exposes the application to the outside environment. Second, it only supports HTTP and HTTPS protocol, right? The other protocols are there, the TCP ones, so that it can't support. It only supports HTTP and HTTPS. If you want to export the TCP service or any other protocol, then you need to use service type or load balancer type of or node port type of services. Okay, and this very important thing is one prerequisite to use this ingress. One prerequisite is there that you need to have ingress controllers in your cluster, right? Ingress controllers. Now what are these ingress controllers? Ingress controllers are like controllers. If you remember in the very first video we have discussed about controllers, right? Cube controllers are there, controller managers, like in the architecture I discussed, there are two nodes, na? Master node and worker node. So inside the master node, this was one of the component of the control plane controllers. Like Kubernetes gives some default controllers, right, to create the service accounts, to create the namespaces, to create the services, right? So there are some default controllers are present, but this ingress controller is not present. Kubernetes doesn't provide this. This is provided by various service providers. Okay, if you say ingress controllers are provided by various service providers, they can be provided by AWS, Azure or GCP, anything or many other. So these are the properties of the cloud providers. Cloud providers provide these controllers to implement. Kubernetes by default doesn't provide. Okay, so when you create a cluster, when you want to use an ingress resource, first you need to deploy ingress controllers into your cluster, then only you can use ingress. Okay, so this is the prerequisite for using ingress. Now we will discuss about ingress by example, then we would understand it better. Okay, so this is the, suppose we have our ingress controller already deployed in our cluster. Now we need to use, now we can use ingress. Okay, so here you see this is the YAML manifest of using ingresses. So kind is ingress, this is the name. Okay, now ingress class name, these rules, these are important. Okay, here I discuss now that routing rules are there. So depending on the request from the traffic, these are the rules. Okay, you see here, path slash test path is there, prefix is there, service is there. So I will explain one by one what is the meaning of each of it. Okay, so let's say you have this, you have a pod, right, that is running a service. So service name is that is the service name that is attached to this pod is this is service. Okay, service is running at port number 80. Okay, this is attached to this. Any traffic comes to this, it goes to this inside the pod. Okay, now the any traffic, let's say here any traffic that comes with a path slash test path, it will be redirected to this service and then finally to this pod. Okay, one more example I will explain, then it would be better. Okay, so first of all, this is important. Okay, so some properties first we will understand. What are the rules we will first we will study rules. Okay, here we will define what are the rules, ingress rules, then I can explain this example. Okay, so rules are like whenever traffic comes, okay, like you created an application and then you exposed it to some URL. Okay, so routing, we need to route to the one of the services. Okay, so routing are two types, means path based routing, and host based routing. Okay. So like this, you have a you have many applications running inside your cluster. Okay, this is service 1, this is service 2, this service 3. Okay, now path based means any request is coming depending, let's say uh, abc.com, this is the host. Okay, now depending on the path, if the path is, let's say, path 1, then it must go to this service. If the path is path 2, it must redirect to this. Similarly, if it's path 3, then it must redirect to this. Okay, so these are the rules. Like how we will write, we will explain the example, but on the high level, what is path based routing in Ingress? Means you have a host, so depending on the path, it redirects to some of the services inside it. Okay, now what is host based routing? Host based routing means if the URL is abc.com, redirect it to some service. Okay, service 1. If the URL is xyz.com, redirect to some other service. So depending on the URL or host, we are redirecting to the different services inside the cluster. Here host is same and we are redirecting to the different paths, that is path based routing. Okay, so now we will explain this example here. Okay, okay, let me make it bigger. Okay, so here you see this kind ingress name is there. First is this host. Okay, so whenever a traffic is coming to first.par.com, we hit this URL. Prefix is slash, means this only this one, nothing path. So it will, where it will redirect? It will redirect it to service 1. Service 1 which is running at port number 80. You see here. Okay. If the URL host is this second.bar.com, it will redirect it to service 2, port 80, that is mentioned here. Okay, you see this section, like these are in same line. Like in YAML, indentation is a very important thing. Okay, so you see this is the host, these are the so inside this this is one section host. Okay, this is second, this is third. Understood? So if the path is this one, it will redirect you to service 1. If the path is second.bar.com, it will redirect to the service 2. Now what is this? This is the, you can say, default. Default meaning if no path is provided, we have a ingress. Okay, we don't provide any host name. Like ingress, in ingress we have a ingress IP. You see, in the first, okay, this ingress there na, this ingress have some IP address. Now if you hit only the IP address of this, then where the traffic should go, right? So the traffic would go here. Like we didn't specify any host, so traffic would go to service. If we don't specify anything, or if we say, if we only use the IP address, okay, of ingress, then here it would redirect to service 3, service 3 port 80. Okay, so these are these we discussed the host based routing and path based routing. Okay, so this is pretty much about ingress. Now the very important question is, in the previous we have already discussed about the services we discussed, right? We have discussed about services, that services were of three type: cluster IP, node port, and load balancer. Okay, so this one was only for internal. We can't expose this using this service type to the outside of cluster, but this we can use, right, to expose this internal services to external. So just a question, if you already have node port service, load balancer service, why we need ingress? Why ingress was introduced? Why ingress we need? We already have load balancer, right? We discussed. If you haven't watched the video, please watch the previous lecture 6. There I have explained clearly what is load balancer. Okay, now we already have load balancer to expose to the outside world. We have already have node port, then why we are using this ingress? So the point is, what load balancer does, you created a service, right? This is your service. Suppose you have three service. This is service 1, this is service 2, this is service 3, running inside the cluster. Now you want to expose it to the outside. What you will do, you will create this service type of load balancer, right? You will create that I will make this type as load balancer. This is load balancer type service, load balancer, to expose it. Again, this is also load balancer, this is also load balancer. Now what load balancer does, the cloud provider which you are using, it will assign some IP address to this. You will get some IP address, IP1 here, IP2 here, IP3 here. Okay, now from this IP you can access from outside. Okay, you are standing at outside of cluster, you can use this IP address to access these services. Okay, now what is the problem is, you have three services, S1, S2, S3, and you have to create three IP addresses. Okay, means Kubernetes has to use three IP addresses here. So more IP, as the IP of addresses, sorry, the IP addresses are equal to the number of services. So more IP addresses are using, more IP addresses are exhausted, means more cost to the Kubernetes environment. Okay, so now what in case of this, if we have used ingress, what happen? Okay, if you are using ingress, okay, we have three services. See, we have three services. I will explain here. We have S1, we have S2, and S3. So ingress is the central point in the cluster for all of the services inside the cluster. Ingress will come here. This is the ingress. Okay, this one is ingress. Now what we can say, we are using only one IP here. Ingress IP will have only one IP. Okay, now depending on the path, we can use path based routing or host based routing. That is upon us. Okay, let's say we created a URL abc.com, and if we give path 1, we redirect the traffic to service 1. If we give path 2, we redirect it to path 2. Similarly, path 3, service 3. Okay, that same concept here. Okay, so you see here we are using only one IP, and now we can use each of the services. We can reach each of the services using only one IP address. So it is more cost effective than the load balancers one. Okay, this is the point. Second advantage is, Second advantage is also one of the huge advantage. Like if you want to make your services secure, right? Secure means HTTPS. And you want to introduce TLS, transfer layer security, to your these services running. Now if you are using load balancer, then you need to implement your TLS logic here, your TLS logic here. 3 times you need to implement it. 3 certificate you need to import at service 1, service 2, service 3. Okay. But now if you are using Ingress, you can abstract it inside service. You don't need to implement. Only at the Ingress level you implemented the TLS logic. Okay. Now Ingress will take care. Okay. Now Ingress will take care, because any traffic that is coming is already passing through the Ingress only. Okay. So the Ingress will take care of the securing connection or TLS keys. No need to implement at the service level. This is the advantage. Okay. So hopefully I have explained clearly about the advantages, like why we use the Ingress, why it was introduced, and not we are using load balancers. Okay. Now, okay, this is pretty much about it, and in the next video we will discuss about gateways. Okay. So hope you are liking my content. If you are liking, please do hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you so much.